of the Revolutionary Tribunal, had expressed the matter in much of the same words. The state of communism is the only just, the only good one. Without this state of things, no peaceful and really happy societies can exist. April 1796 finished his Manifesto of Equals, Web 57 through 58. Babeuf then decided that a secret directorate must be formed, of which the workers bear a curious resemblance to those of the Illuminati. Thus, Weishaupt had employed 12 leading adepts to direct operations throughout Germany, and had strictly enjoined his followers not to be known even to each other as Illuminati. So Babeuf now instituted 12 principal agents to work the different districts of Paris, and these men were not even to know the names of those who formed the Central Committee of Four, but only to communicate with them through intermediaries, partially initiated into the secrets of the conspiracy. Like Weishaupt also, Babeuf adopted a domineering and arrogant tone toward his subordinates, and any whom he suspected of treachery were threatened, after the manner of the secret societies, with the direst vengeance. Woe to those of whom we have cause to complain, he wrote to one whose zeal had begun to doubt. Reflect that true conspirators can never relinquish those they have once decided to employ. By April 1796, the plan of insurrection was complete, and the famous Manifesto of the Equals was drawn up and ready for publication. People of France, this proclamation announced, for 15 centuries you have lived in slavery and consequently in unhappiness. For 6 years, during the course of the Revolution, you have hardly drawn breath, waiting for independence, for happiness, and equality. Equality, the first desire of nature, the first need of man, and the principal bond of all legal association. Well, we intend henceforth to live and to die equal, as we were born. We wish for real equality or death. That is what we must have. And we will have this real equality, no matter at what price. Woe to those who interpose themselves between it and us. Roofs of our houses, we will consent to anything for that, to make a clean sweep so as to hold to that only. Perish, if necessary, all the arts provided that real equality is left to us. The agrarian law and the division of lands were the momentary wish of a few soldiers without principle, moved by instinct rather than by reason. We tend to something more sublime and equitable, the common happiness or the community of goods. No more private property in land. The land belongs to no one, we claim. We wish for the communal enjoyment of the fruits of the earth. The fruits of the earth belong to everyone. We declare that we can no longer endure that the great majority of men should work and sweat in the service and for the good pleasure of an extreme minority. Long enough and too long have less than 1 million individuals disposed of what belongs to more than 20 millions of their fellowmen, of their equals. Let it cease at last, this great scandal in which our nephews will not be able to believe. Vanish at last revolting distinctions of rich and poor, of great and small, of masters and servants, of governors and governed. Let there be no other difference between men than that of age and sex. Since all have the same needs and the same faculties, let there be only one education, one kind of food. They content themselves with one son and heir for all. Why should not the same portion and the same quality of food suffice for each of them? People of France, we say to you, the holy enterprise that we are organizing has no other object but to put forth an end to civil dissensions and to public misery. Never has a more vast design been conceived and executed. From time to time, a few men of genius, a few sages have spoken in a low and trembling voice. Not one of them has had the courage to tell the whole truth. The moment for great measures has arrived. The evil is at its height. It covers the face of the earth. Chaos under the name of politics has reigned for too many centuries. The moment has come to found the Republic of the Equals, the great hostel open to all men. Groaning families, come and seat yourselves at the common table set up by nature for all her children. People of France, open your eyes and heart to the plenitude of happiness. Recognize and proclaim with us the Republic of Equals. This document was destined, however, not to be displayed to the eyes of the public, for the secret committee finally decided that it would be inexpedient to admit the people into the whole plan of the conspiracy. Particularly did they judge it inadvisable to publish the phrase which had been expressed in almost identical language by Weishaupt. Perish all the arts, provided that real equality is left to us. The people of France were not to know that a return to barbarism was contemplated. Accordingly, a second proclamation was framed under the title of Analysis of the Doctrine of Babeuf, a far less inspiring appeal than the former manifesto, and mainly unintelligible to the working classes. Yet, as M. Fleury remarks, the veritable Bible or Koran of the despotic system known as communism. For herein lies the crux of the matter. No one reading these two documents of the Bobovistes can fail to recognize the truth of certain of their structures on society. The glaring disparity between poverty and riches, the uneven distribution of work and pleasure, the injustice of an industrial system whereby, owing largely at this period to the suppression of trade unions by the revolutionary leaders, employers could live in luxury by sweated labor. But the point is, how did Babeuf propose to redress these evils? Briefly, then, his system, founded on the doctrine of
All right, what's up? So I'm Unseen Warfare. We're here today, and I've labeled this episode "The Sower" because I do plan on talking about sowing seeds in the faith and what that means, and we're gonna get into the parable of the sower. So let's get into that first. Okay, so here's the parable of the sower. Matthew 13. That same day, Jesus went out of the house and sat by the lake. Such large crowds gathered around him that he got into a boat and sat in it while all the people stood on the shore. Then he told them many things in parables, saying, quote, a farmer went out to sow his seed. As he was scattering the seed, some fell along the path, and the birds came and ate it up. Some fell on rocky places where it did not have much soil. It sprang up quickly because the soil was shallow. But when the sun came up, the plants were scorched, and they withered because they had no root. Other seed fell among thorns, which grew up and choked the plants. Still other seed fell on good soil, where it produced a crop, 160 or 30 times what was sown. Whoever has ears, let him hear. The disciples came to him and asked him, "Why do you speak to the people in parables?" He replied, "Because the knowledge of the secrets of the kingdom of heaven have been given to you, but not to them. Whoever has whoever has will be given more, and they will have an abundance. Whoever does not have, even what they have will be taken from them. This is why I speak to them in parables. Though seeing they do not see, though hearing they do not hear nor understand. And them is fulfilled the prophecy of Isaiah, quote, "You will ever be hearing but never understanding. You will ever you will be ever seeing but never perceiving. For this people's heart has become callous. They hardly hear with their ears, and they have closed their eyes. Otherwise, they might see with their eyes and hear with their ears, understand with their hearts, and turn, and I would heal them. But blessed are your eyes because they see, and your ears because they hear. For truly I tell you, many prophets and righteous people longed to see what you see, but did not see it, and to hear what you hear, but did not hear it. Listen then to what the parable of the sower means. When anyone hears the message about the kingdom and does not understand it, the evil one comes and snatches it away, what was sown in their heart. This is the seed sown along the path. The seed falling on rocky ground refers to someone who hears the word at once and receives it with joy, but since they have no root, they last only a short time. When trouble or persecution comes because of the word, they quickly fall away. The seed falling among the thorns refers to someone who hears the word, but the worries of this life and the deceitfulness of wealth choke the word, making it unfruitful. But the seed falling on good soil refers to someone who hears the word and understands it. This is the one who produces a crop, yielding 160 or 30 times what was sown. The parable of the weeds. Jesus told them another parable. The kingdom of heaven is like a man who sowed good seeds in his field. But while everyone is sleeping, his enemy came and sowed weeds among the wheat and went away. When the wheat sprouted and formed heads, then the weeds also appeared. Quote, the owner's servants came to him and said, "Sir, didn't you sow good seed in your field? Where then did the weeds come from?" Quote, "An enemy did this," he replied. Quote, the servants asked him, "Do you want us to go and pull them up?" Quote, "No," he answered, "because while you are pulling the weeds, you may uproot the wheat with them. Let both grow together until the harvest. At that time I will tell the harvesters, first collect the weeds and tie them in bundles to be burned, then gather the wheat and bring it into my barn." Okay, so that's often taken a certain way by the world Orthodox, as if uh, Christ is sort of telling them that it's okay to stay in communion with heretics, let the wheat sort of grow with the weeds, right? That it is possible to grow with them because of this parable. Well, let's go to the parable actually and see what the saints say about this, if they have anything to say like that, you know. So we were in Matthew chapter 13. Or wait, what was it? Yeah, Matthew 13, I believe is what it was. Yes, that's where we're at. Matthew 13. Okay, so let's see. I got something else on this. got an article I wanted to bring up. Just give me one moment.
Community of goods and of labor may be summarized as follows. Everyone must be forced to work so many hours a day in return for equal remuneration. The man who showed himself more skillful or industrious than his fellows would be recompensed merely by public gratitude. This compulsory labor was in fact not to be paid for in money, but in kind. For, since the right to private property constituted the principal evil of existing society, the distinction of mine and thine must be abolished, and no one should be allowed to possess anything of his own. Payment could only therefore be made in the products of labor, which were all to be collected in huge communal stores and doled out in equal rations to the workers. Inevitably, commerce would be entirely done away with, and money was no longer to be coined or admitted to the country. Foreign trade must therefore be carried on by coin now in circulation, and when that was exhausted, by a system of barter. But people were not informed of this, Allah Wishapt, told only that the goods of the enemies of the people would be given to the needy. But the people were not in the secret of the movement. Just as in the great outbreaks of the revolution, the mob of Paris has been driven blindly forward on false pretexts supplied by the agitators.
Okay, so we got the article I was looking for, The Granary of the Heart. Let's get into it. It says, in today's gospel, the Lord instructs the disciples on two levels: how to understand heresies and schism in the church, and how to understand the warfare between good and evil in the heart. Another parable put forth unto them, saying, the kingdom of heaven is likened unto a man which sowed good seed in his field, but while men slept, his enemy came and sowed tares among the wheat, and went his way. But when the blade was sprung up and brought forth fruit, then appeared the tares also. So the servants of the householders came and said unto them, Sir, didst thou not sow good seed in thy field? From whence then has its tares? He said unto them, An enemy has done this. The servant said unto him, Wilt thou then that we go and gather them up? But he said, Nay, least while ye gather up the tares, ye root up also the wheat with them. Let both grow together until the harvest. And in the same time of the harvest, I will say to the reapers, Gather ye together first the tares, and bind them in bundles to burn them, but gather the wheat into my barn. Matthew chapter 13, verses 24 through 30. St. Theophan the Recluse guides us into an understanding of the Lord's words as relating to the church, as relating to our inner life. The good seed was sown, but the enemy came and sowed tares among the wheat. The tares in the church are heresies and schisms, while in each of us they are bad thoughts, feelings, desires, and passions. A person accepts the good seed of the word by God, decides to live in a daily holy way, and begins to live in this way. When such a person falls asleep, that is, when his attention towards himself weakens, then the enemy of salvation comes and places evil ideas in him, which, if not rejected at the start, ripen into desires and dispositions, introducing their own spheres of activity, which mix themselves in with good works, feelings, and thoughts. In this way, both remain together until the harvest. This harvest is repentance. Repentance, the Lord sends his angels, a feeling of contrition and the fear of God, and they come in like a sickle and then burn up all the terrors in the fire of a painful self condemnation. Pure wheat remains in the granary of the heart, and the joy of man, the angels, and the most good God worshipped in Trinity. Thoughts for each day of the year, pages 143 and 144. In the church, the tares, weeds, are heresies and schisms. Today, clever people have fabricated a novel teaching that the Lord commanded not to tear up the weeds, means that we are not allowed to separate from the heretics, and therefore the Orthodox who separated from bishops because they are heretics thereby become schismatics. Because, according to this novel idea, heretics remain in the church like weeds among the wheat until the dread judgment, and the heresy of a bishop, contrary to the teachings of all the fathers, quote, is a private sin that only affects his soul, not the souls of his flock. Therefore, according to this idea, it is required to commemorate and remain in communion with heretics in order to remain in communion with the church. One must continue to indefinitely in communion with heretics, commemorating unrepentant heretical bishops, obeying them, and receiving what purport to be sacraments from them, perhaps until the end of time. This error is ridiculous, of course, despite the fact that recent much adored pseudo saints of official orthodoxy have taught it in their deluded disciples, trapping them in heresy while they imagine that they are preserved from all harm because their elders Epitrachilion magically preserved them from the apostasy of the bishops, whose names they continue to invoke at the liturgies they served, on Andamesia, quote, consecrated by these heretics, in addition to the abundant historical evidence against this error. St. John Chrysostom also corrects those who teach it in his 46 homily on Matthew, which you can read online here. There's a link to the New Advent site given. I guess people couldn't see that early. So, the great Chrysostom here relates not only his own teachings, but also the consensus of the Fathers. Lord, in this passage, is not forbidding us to separate from the heretics. He is not forbidding us even from actively opposing them with lethal methods of coercion if necessary. And as possible, not likely nowadays, he's simply saying, do not shed their blood, do not slay them. End quote. St. Theophan, in his commentary on his passage, however, spends only one sentence, less than one sentence, only one clause on this ecclesiological theme, which he mentions in passing. His chief topic, as usual, is the spiritual life of the Christian soul. The wheat consists of our good works, feelings, and thoughts, and the tares are our bad thoughts, feelings, desires, and passions. Just as at the end of the world the Lord will send his angels to gather his enemies and burn them, so now in this life he sends his messengers, contrition and the fear of God, to burn up our evil inclinations and gather our spiritual goods, our good thoughts and habits of mind and actions, our virtues, into the barn of the heart, where they are kept safe by grace, and induct us into the heavenly kingdom, which we begin to experience by anticipation, even here on earth. St. Isaac the Syrian also connects our salvation today in the heart with our eternal salvation in the kingdom that is to come. Be a persecutor of yourself, and your enemy will be driven from your proximity. Be peaceful within yourself, and heaven and earth will be at peace with you. Be diligent to enter into the treasury that is within you, and you will see the treasury of heaven. For these are one and the same, and with one entry you will behold them both. The ladder of the kingdom is within you, hidden in your soul. Plunge deeply within yourself, away from sin, and there you will find steps by which you will be able to ascend. The ascetical homilies of St. Isaac the Syrian, homily 2. Paradise and hell, then both begin in this life. Let us beg the Lord and his good messengers, contrition and the fear of God, to burn up our sins and passions, to collect our scattered thoughts into one thought, the name of Jesus, concentrated in the granary of the heart. There will, uh, there we will have paradise, both in this life and the age to come. Okay, so this is a quite interesting article, from Father Stephen Allen. I'm going to actually link that here just in case. one of my brothers comes across somebody who's making this argument to them about staying in communion with heretics. uh, Father Allen beautifully kind of refuted that with that polemic, and that was really like a major topic that because I think I heard somebody say that to me one time, make that argument, and of course it's one of those things for a true Orthodox. It's like we're discerning enough to know like we shouldn't be in communion with heretics. But sometimes, unfortunately, we come in contact with the world Orthodox guys, and they do have clever arguments because they're not stupid people. And we've never said they're stupid. It's rather it's a demonic delusion that's going on. It's spiritual delusion, really. So, uh, but yeah, these guys come up with these like really difficult arguments kind of to deal with, and this is kind of one of them. And another, uh, the Argenti argument. That was, I think, Bishop Enoch recently covered that. That was a great explanation. But unfortunately, they use a lot of rhetoric, and sort of, the irony is they call us Protestants because we broke communion with the new calendars. They say we're Protestant-like. But, I mean, isn't that a kind of a Protestant way of thinking, interpreting, verses from the scriptures not in the way that the saints interpret them? And they say things like they'll say things last episode I think, or maybe it was the episode before, I think we were talking about either the 6th or the 7th ecumenical council, and the world Orthodox basically say that you can't consider somebody outside of the church unless they're removed from the church by council. Well, I think the 7th Ecumenical Council directly refutes that statement, right? So a part of our walk, I guess, with Christ and in the church, and this is for everybody, and myself included, because I look at this as sort of just like something I'm learning with everybody. I'm learning as I'm going, but it's this thing where it's like, okay, how do I put this? I don't know. I lost my train of thought, really. Yeah. It's a strange topic, but you see it a lot in world Orthodoxy, where they're kind of constantly looking for rhetoric to twist, to paint a certain narrative, and unfortunately for them, it's like in order to do this, you're having to lie, and I think Father Seraphim said this once, or Saint Seraphim rather. He said, um, the church doesn't need you to lie for it, and that's a big indicator that somebody is missing the mark in a major way. If they're lying to defend the church, because all lies are damned to hell, they're of Satan, this isn't of God. Lies cannot be of God. So, but oftentimes, in our modernist kind of perspective, I think a lot of guys think, and they're Orthodox Christians, and that, they say things like, well, the ends justify the means. Absolutely. Papism has this a direct issue too, and I think the shared relationship between papism and world Orthodoxy really is the way they view the church. They don't view the church as the mystical body of Christ, I don't think. I think they see it as an institution. So being a part of that institution means, being in communion with them and their organization. They don't have any concept of a mystical body. That's really what it is. And they definitely have no distinction between the church militant and the church triumphant. We kind of went through that the other week. Not that these are separate churches or there's two churches or something. There's not two churches. There's the church that's connected to the church on earth that's in heaven, and they're one church. But with the world Orthodox, this is what happens. Since the they don't have this concept where they only view the church as an institution. That means heretics can stay within the church, the body of Christ, and still be valid and still give them sacraments, right? And it's an oxymoron that doesn't make any sense. How can a heretic be Orthodox, right? And it's like, well, there hasn't been a council to denounce them yet. Well, that's not how things work in Orthodox history. We got to go off the historical perspective, and that's exactly as my friend Atomic Lead just pointed out. That's the reason why papism is false, because there's not a historical relationship between what they're teaching today and the historical faith that we see from the scriptures on up for the first 1,000 years. For instance, with papism, it's like even the title of pope wasn't viewed the way the modern papists view the title of pope. It was an honorary title for the the early Christians. Pope, the fact that Rome was the imperial capital and they were truly Orthodox and they were the oldest see. Therefore, he had this honorary title of being pope. But this doesn't mean he was infallible over the church or he's like Christ on earth or something. That's the kind of like sleight of hand that often gets played with the papists, is they try to conflate, two very different concepts of pope. It's like, well, you could go to a quote from the fathers and say, see, he says he's commemorating the pope and he's saying, we respect Rome first, or something like that. It's like, well, yes, in the context that they were Orthodox, there's the stipulation there. um, but yeah, it's a strange kind of thing going on. Oh, I was looking at something today. Let's see what we can go. um, I was looking at some of this Epstein stuff. It's unbelievable, really. uh, So let's see if I can bring some of this stuff up. So I found a link. Oh, I'll just show it. Let's see if we can do this here. Take this off. Stop screen sharing. Screen share something else. Okay, here we are. Here we got Jeffrey Epstein was Vladimir Putin's wealth manager. FBR source claimed in newly released Epstein files. People magazine or something just posted that, or and I seen it. I kind of picked it up. It was crazy. The FBI source. Hold on. Wait. Hold on. The FBI source who had an established relationship with the bureau claimed in their testimony that Epstein, a wealth manager, quote, made money from charging his clients fees to hide their money offshore. So he's a wealth manager for Vladimir Putin. He's a wealth manager supposedly for the Rothschilds in France. That's what he told LED Rothschild, according to Wexner, the guy, the Victoria's Secret guy. So, this is something interesting. Charlie Kirk said Epstein's calendar reveals he met with CIA Director William Burns, Henry Kissinger, Israeli Prime Minister Ehud Barak, and Obama White House counsel Catherine Rumler, a Rothschild, all after he was a registered sex offender. This is why we'll never see Epstein's client list. So, in other words, this guy was full on, just globalist, communist, Illuminati. I mean, what can you really say? The Rothschilds are Epstein files over 11,000 times. Epstein says he represented the Rothschilds. Let's go to the Wexner thing. Let's see. Here it is. Here's Wexner.
Well, specifically, I talked to Ellie de Rothschild, and so I mentioned that earlier. So he represented their whole family. So there have been a whole bunch of people. Most of them I never would have met, but I knew Ellie. He would say, like, I'm providing financial advice to the founders of Google. I'm providing financial advice to Jeff Bezos. Answer the question. Okay. Doing personal work for the Rothschild family in France. Well, specific.
Well, I mean, can they be? The lawyer's telling he's going to kill him if he talks anymore. Wexner's just openly, admitting that he had. What is going on with this? Oh. Wexner's openly admitting that, he was put on to Epstein by Ellie de Rothschild. So that's why he was giving him money and sending, I mean, it's crazy. What is he going to act like, he didn't know what he was doing? Something crazy Dugin said. Today, Ukrainians are a race of degenerates that crawled up from the sewage. Genocide is in order. Of course, Dugin's a neo-Bolshevik. Russia's chief rabbi, Beryl Laser, confirms that the Jewish family that raised Vladimir Putin was Hasidic or likely Chabad. This is the whole clip. No, I think that's the same. This meeting shows meetings with Gates, the Rothschilds, and Prime Minister of Israel. Lex Wessner testified that he was persuaded to grant Epstein power of attorney, millions of dollars, and unprecedented control of his business empire because of a referral from Ellie de Rothschild. Yeah, it's craziness. Oh, this is pretty crazy. Gwen Stefani doing like this weird
day Lent prayer challenge. It's going to be incredible. Check it out. God bless. Hey everyone, I just got my ashes and I'm ready for Lent. This year, I'll be doing Hallow's 40-day Lent prayer challenge.
So that Hallow app, the guy, Jonathan Rumi, he's on it. Marky Mark's on there promoting it. I've seen them on TV, but I didn't know Peter Thiel. He's the guy that funded the app. That's weird, isn't it? We got Alex Jones admitting he was
medical procedures on high-level CIA people. Then I was talking to another because I had some family that did stuff for the CIA. Because my dad, he was someone who would do medical procedures on high-level CIA people. Then I was talking to another insider who'd multiple times been around a bunch of Masons. I've had a lot of family that were high-level Masons. I don't hide that fact. I've had family that have been 33rd degree Masons. What do you think they discovered? I've got family on both sides involved in the founding of Texas. Lone Star State, you think I know about Masons? You know how many family aprons I've got in storage? I have to probably say that I have major Masonic roots. A lot of my family, because Texas was pretty much Masonic through and through, was Masonic, high-level Masonic. And so undoubtedly, if you want to say it, I would say I come out of a classical Enlightenment family of what you would call real Illuminati, real Enlightenment. And I'll just say it here. Everybody asks me who I am, I'll tell you. China's got tens of thousands of front companies. Their propaganda is in every big movie you see, folks. Hollywood sold out the People's Liberation Army for funding and made films for Chinese propaganda. So almost all films are approved by Chinese communists now. It makes the films really dumbed down and stupid. Let me tell you who took over Hollywood. the communist Chinese. I've seen the jihadists and the Saudi Arabian money become so powerful in their influencing of Hollywood and the popular culture that they've basically gained the upper hand even against Zionism and the different varieties of Zionism that exist. I've been taken out of context when I've obviously Hollywood is predominantly Jewish dominated. No one denies that. And I was pointing out the biggest single owners in Fox, if you put them together, are Saudi Arabians. Rupert Murdoch has a deal where he can own a minority of Fox, but in those deals, he and his family still control Fox. The globalists that are a bunch of old, evil white men mainly, it's not a Jewish mafia. At the very top of this thing, it is the most European royalty operation you can imagine. That's the top of the pyramid. So at the top is a European royalty. I'm not an apologist for Jews. Use your head. The ADL and these powerful leftist Jewish organizations are up to their eyeballs in real Nazis. So what does the ADL and the left have in common with Adolf Hitler? They're as pagan as the day is long. If you think the head of the ADL is actually a practicing Jew, I got a bridge I'm ready to sell you. It's critical to understanding what's going on, to not make this about Jews. My job is not to be an apologist for Jews, and I'm not their apologist. I'm giving you facts here. If you go just by activity, the ADL is the most Nazi-like organization on the planet today. Whatever Hitler did, they do it. They're dressing up the New World Order tyranny in a Jewish outfit, but the heart of it is a bunch of people hailing Hitler. This New World Order is mad scientists, Nazis on steroids. So when I say Nazis on steroids, I mean this is the Nazis' mama. And the ADL came right out from between the same legs that Hitler came out from between. The ADL came out of the same womb as Adolf Hitler was.
Well, I don't know. You know, he says things that are quite strange. But, I mean, I agree with him about Hitler. I believe he was an asset of the Rothschilds. I see Hitler as sort of an antichrist figure anyways, you know, which I take Jerry Lena's stance. If you read Architects of Deception, that's a great book. And there's another book called Ferbato the Magician that talks about the Masonic connections with Hitler. So there's that. And you know, really his whole plan was he was like the Maitreya, you know, this new age messiah for the Thule society. And I mean, he just sort of played the same role as the Kabbalistic Jews, but they just direct it towards Germany. You know, it's not the Jew that's the chosen person, is the German. So I mean, you're trying to beat your enemy with your enemy's games, and that's just not possible. And in reality, I think that was just controlled opposition. I think that, you know, when you're dealing with oligarchs that are funding, you know, these workers' parties to take over countries, these people don't care. They know that there's going to be a response against communism. They know that there's going to be a pushback. So what do? You fund the fascists. You know, I mean, that makes the most sense. They control both sides of the parties and act as if, you know, these two parties are fighting each other or whatever. I mean, that's the dialectic, right? That's what everybody says. And I believe that to be true. I do. So I'm going to put on this for a little bit. I'm going to step away. Unfortunately, I'm not feeling well today. I just got a headache or something. So
The Secret Committee of Direction well knew that communism was a system that would never appeal to the people. They were careful, therefore, not to admit their dupes among the working classes into the whole of their program. And believing that it was only by an appeal to self-interest and covetousness they could secure a following, they skillfully played on the people's passions, promising them booty they had no intention of bestowing on them. Thus, in the insurrectional act, now drawn up by the committee, it was announced that the goods of the emigres, of the conspirators, i.e., the royalists, and the enemies of the people, were to be distributed to the defenders of the country and the needy. They did not tell them that in reality these things were to belong to no one, but to become the property of the state, administered by themselves. The people then were not to be allowed to know the truth about the cause in which they were asked to shed their blood, and they would be obliged to shed it in torrents no sane man could doubt. His admiration for Robespierre, Web 64. When it came to organizing the required insurrection, Babeuf adopted a very different kind of language. In fact, the former denouncer of Robespierre's system of depopulation now asserted that not only Robespierre's aims, but his methods were to be commended. I confess today that I bear a grudge against myself for having formerly seen the revolutionary government and Robespierre and Saint Just in such black colors. I think these men alone were worth all the revolutionaries put together, and that their dictatorial government was devilishly well thought out. I do not at all agree that they committed great crimes and made many Republicans perish. Not so many, I think. The salvation of 25 millions of men must not be weighed against consideration for a few equivocal individuals. A regenerator must take a wide outlook. He must mow down everything that thwarts him, everything that obstructs his passage, everything that can impede his prompt arrival at the goal on which he has determined. Rascals or imbeciles, or presumptuous people, or those who eager for glory. It is all the same. So much the pity for them. What are they there for? Robespierre knew all that, and is partly what makes me admire him. But where Babeuf showed himself the intellectual inferior of Robespierre was in the way he proposed to overcome resistance to his plan of a socialist state. Robespierre, as he well knew, had spent 14 months mowing down those that had obstructed his passage, and had kept the guillotine unremittingly at work in Paris and the provinces, yet even then had not succeeded in silencing objectors. But Babeuf hoped to accomplish his purpose in one day, that great day of the people, wherein all opposition should be instantly suppressed, the whole existing social order annihilated, and the Republic of Equality erected on its ruins. If, however, the process were to be brief, it must necessarily be all the more violent, and it was thus with none of the calm precision of Robespierre marking down heads for destruction that Babeuf set about his task. His frenzy. Web 65. When writing out his plans of insurrection, his secretary Pillet afterwards related at his trial, Babeuf would rush up and down the room with flaming eyes, mouthing and grimacing, hitting himself against the furniture, knocking over the chairs whilst uttering hoarse cries of, "To arms! To arms! The insurrection! The insurrection is beginning!" "It was an insurrection against the chairs," said Pillet drily. Then Babeuf would fling himself upon his pen, plunge it into the ink, and write with fearful rapidity, whilst his whole body trembled, and the perspiration poured from his brow. It was no longer madness, added Pillet, it was frenzy. This frenzy, Babeuf explained, was necessary in order to work himself up to the required degree of eloquence, and in his appeals to insurrection, it was difficult to see where his program differed from the brigandage and violence he had deprecated. The The Great Day of Revolution, Web 67 through 68. The following program for the Great Day was now drawn up by the secret directory. At a given moment, the Revolutionary Army was to march on the Legislative Assembly, on the headquarters of the army, and on the houses of the ministers. The best trained troops were to be sent to the arsenals and the munition factories, and also to the camps of Vincennes and Grenelle, in the hope that the 8,000 men encamped there would join in the movement. Meanwhile, orators were to hold forth to the soldiers, and women were to present them with refreshment and civic wreaths. In the event of their remaining proof against those seductions, the streets were to be barricaded, and stones, bricks, boiling water, and vitriol thrown down on the heads of the troops. All supplies for the capital were then to be seized and placed under the control of the leaders. At the same time, the wealthier classes were to be driven from their houses, which were immediately to be converted into lodgings for the poor. The members of the directory were then to be butchered. Likewise, all citizens who offered any resistance to the insurgents. The insurrection thus happily terminated, as Babeuf naively expressed it, the whole people were to be assembled in the Place de la Révolution and invited to cooperate in the choice of their representatives. The plan, writes Buronati, was to talk to the people without reserve and without digressions, and to render the most impressive homage to its sovereignty. But lest the people perchance, blinded to its truest interests, might fail to recognize its saviors in the person of the conspirators, the Babouvistites proposed to follow up their homage of the people's sovereignty by demanding that executive power should be exclusively confided to themselves. For, as Buronati observed, at the beginning of the revolution it is necessary, even out of respect for the real sovereignty of the people, to occupy oneself less with the wishes of the nation than to place supreme authority in strongly revolutionary hands. Once in these hands, it would of course remain there, and the Babovistes, with all the civil and military forces at their back, would be able to impose their system of state serfdom on the submissive people. Violence. 70. At a meeting of the committee, there was read aloud the finished plan of insurrection, to which further atrocious details had been added. Everyone attempting to exercise any authority was instantly to be put to death. The armorers were to be forced to give up their arms, the bakers their supplies of bread, and those who resisted hoisted to the nearest lantern. The same fate was reserved for all wine and spirit merchants, who might refuse to provide the brandy needed to inflame the populace and drive them into violence. All reflection on the part of the people must be avoided, ran the written directions to the leaders. They must commit acts which will prevent them from going back. Amongst the whole of this ferocious band, Rossignol, the former general of the revolutionary armies in La Vendée, showed himself the most bloodthirsty. "I will not have anything to do with your insurrection," he cried, "unless heads fall like hail, unless it inspires so great a terror that it makes the whole universe shudder," a discourse that met with unanimous applause. The 11th of May had been fixed for the great day of explosion, when not only Paris, but all the cities of France, worked on by the agents of Babeuf, were to rise and overthrow the whole structure of civilization. Meanwhile, there was an informant, and the government, warned of the impending attack, was ready to meet it. On the morning of the day appointed, a placard was found posted up on all the walls of Paris bearing these words: "The Executive Directory to the Citizens of Paris. Citizens, A frightful plot is to break out this night or tomorrow at the dawn of day. A band of thieves and murderers has formed the project of butchering the Legislative Assembly, all the members of the government, the staff of the army, and all constituted authorities in Paris. The Constitution of '93 is to be proclaimed. This proclamation is to be the signal for a general pillage of Paris, of houses and much of the stores and shops, and the massacre of a great number of citizens is to be carried out at the same time. But be reassured, good citizens, the government is watching. It knows the leaders of the plot and their methods. Be calm, therefore, and carry on your ordinary business. The government has taken infallible measures for outwitting their schemes and for giving them up with their partisans to the vengeance of the law. Then, without further warning, the police burst into the house where Babouf and Buranati were drawing up a rival placard calling the people to revolt. In the midst of their task, the arm of the law surprised and seized them, and on the following morning 45 other leaders of the conspiracy were arrested, likewise, and thrown into the Abbaye. Alas for the support they had hoped from the populace! The revolutionary army on which they had counted, impressed as the people always are by a display of authority, went over to the police in support of law and order. With the removal of the agitators, the whole populace came to their senses and realized the full horror of the plot into which they had been inveigled. Napoleon averted them and ended the last great attempt in French Revolution to realize the aim of Illuminism. 5. Revolutionaries devoured each other. Beruel 4, 338 through 39. Christ had no more altar in France. The kings had no more throne. Those who had destroyed the altar and the throne conspired against each other. The intruders, the atheists, and the deists slaughtered the Catholics. The intruders, the atheists, and the deists slaughtered one another. The constitutionalists pursued the royalists. The Republicans pursued the constitutionalists. The Democrats of the one and indivisible republic butchered the Democrats of the Federate Republic. The faction of the mountain guillotined the faction of the Gironde. The faction of the mountain divided into the faction of Herbert and of Marat, into the faction of Danton and of Chabot, into the faction of Cloutz and of Chaumet, into the faction of Robespierre, which devoured them all, and which would be in its turn devoured by the faction of Tallien and of Freron. Brisset and Gisson, Gaudet, Fauchet, Riband, Barbaroux, and 30 others were sentenced by Fouquier Tinville as they had passed sentence on Louis XVI. Fouquier Tinville was himself judged as he judged Brissot. Pétion and Bazou, wandering in the forest, perished consumed by hunger, devoured by beasts. Perrin died in chains. Condorcet poisoned himself in prison. Valage and Labat stabbed themselves. Marat was murdered by Charlotte Corday. Robespierre is no more. Of them, Sieyès still remains, because France must yet have its plagues. Lianifer, to establish the reign of his impiety, Lesiel, to punish him for it, gave her, France, under the name of directors, her 5 tyrants or her pentarches, and her double senate, Rubel, Canor, Barras, Latiur, La Revelière, La Pau, rob her of her weapons, drive out the deputies of her equality and her liberty, batter her sections with cannon and mortars, squeeze her in his clutches, and cause to hang upon her a yoke of iron. All tremble before them, they are frightened, envying one another, withdrawing from one another, only allowing new tyrants to arrive and join together. the deportations, the stupor, the terror, and these pentarchs. At this moment, those are the gods who rule over France. The silence of the terror in her empire, where her vast prison, 20 million slaves all dumb with terror under the shaft, at the mere name of La Guyane, of Merlin, or of Rouble. Behold this people so often proclaimed equal and free and sovereign. France ruined by revolution. Webster 49 through 50. The condition of France at the end of the terror. France is demoralized. She is exhausted. This is the last trait of this country in ruins. There is no longer any public opinion, or rather, this opinion is made up only of hatred. They hate the directors, members of the directory, and they hate the deputies. They hate the terrorists, and they hate the
Okay, my people. So I'm back. I'm just not feeling great. So we made it to an hour. I wasn't gonna do the show because I just didn't feel great, but I got what I said, what I wanted to say out about the sower and that whole situation. I'm gonna drop that link here if I still got it. Let's see if I still got it. Yeah, I still got it. Okay. I don't know if I dropped this link already or not. Okay. So I'm gonna, try to get my head right, lay down for a minute, maybe take some Tylenol or something, and then I might pop back up in an hour or two. That's a big if, because I do want to cover some more things. I appreciate everybody that stopped by. Uh, yeah, I appreciate you guys. I'm Unseen Warfare. Take it easy. Later.